This is now week 2 of a new summers we're doing on 1 Peter. I love it, preaching through a whole book. Peter's theme of standing steadfast in Jesus Christ. As Peter is writing to Christians who are really undergoing some hard times, so much suffering that many of them have been displaced out of the Holy Land, and they are way north into Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. And so to these Christians then, who their faith is under fire, and Christians today, who we know our share of hardship and tribulation, sometimes we can foresee it coming, but other times our tribulation and hardship can be a bolt out of the blue. So to Christians then and now who are undergoing hardship, Peter in the first chapter really starts by holding out to us hope. In the Greek New Testament, the word for hope is alpizo. It almost sounds Italian, doesn't it? Alpizo. Hope. But hope is so important to us that Peter uses it 3 times in just the opening chapter. Why is hope so essential to us as people? Listen to these statistics that give us an idea of just how important hope is to every one of us. Employees who are hopeful about their company or their employer's mission, vision, and future, on average miss 2.5 additional days of work each year, not counting planned leave or vacation days. Where employees who do not feel hopeful about their employer's future or vision, on average miss 10 additional days a year above their leave and vacation. College students who are hopeful receive better GPAs, studies have shown, than those who are less hopeful. And college students who are hopeful are more likely to graduate compared to those who are less. Athletes who are hopeful actually play better on the field. Their bodies respond better to injuries, and their minds better adjust to unforeseen changes. Elderly who are less hopeful are 2 times as likely to die from an illness than elderly who are hopeful. And when it comes to people who are contemplating ending their own life, studies have shown the number one determinative factor is not how much pain that person is in or their level of suffering or whether they are rich or poor. The number one determinative factor is that person's sense of hope. We need hope. Hope is just as vital to us as water is to sharks, whales, and manatees. Right? We cannot live, we cannot work, we cannot parent, we cannot study, we cannot play or perform or even follow Jesus without hope. In our section today, look what Peter does with hope. He creates what we would call a literary envelope, where he bookends the verses we're going to look at today with hope. Verse 13, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you when Jesus Christ comes back. And then look at how he wraps it up at the end. Your faith and hope are in God. he frames this with hope. What is our hope that we have in Jesus Christ? Pastor Micah talked about that last week when he kicked off with the first few verses. We have been born, Peter says, into a living hope with an inheritance in heaven. That's our hope. Peter says, as newborns in Jesus Christ, we have a hope in heaven that is eternal. And nothing that goes on here, no matter how tragic or how difficult, can dampen that reality of our inheritance in any way. Peter says it can't fade, it won't spoil, it cannot be stolen. It's kept in heaven for you. That's real hope. That God in Jesus Christ has already written your name on His will. And when we always then have that hope, no matter how bad conditions get here, we always have our minds fixed fully on that hope that's going to be fully revealed to us when Jesus Christ comes back. That hope changes how we live today. Peter's going to go on to talk now about two ways that hope makes a difference today. The first is in a negative sense, but it's a good thing. And the second then is in a very positive sense. Look at how the first way that hope changes are today. With our eyes fixed there on that inheritance, he says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lust, which you did in your ignorance. What does Peter mean by being conformed to those former lusts, which we did in our ignorance? He's calling many Christians back to what their lives were like pre-conversion, what their lives looked like before Jesus. Or for some, if they were baptized when they were young, maybe what their lives looked like before they got serious with their faith. How many probably could look back on our lives in high school and college or pre-conversion and see lives that reflected pretty well the ways of this world and its ungodliness. But now Peter says, as obedient children, right, with our eyes fixed on that hope, it gives us the power to change, to keep those sinful lusts at bay. I read a true story. It just happened recently in the Florida Everglades. A boat with a group of men went out fishing. And one of them ended up catching what would be a smaller fish and brought it up right-handed likely and took the hook out of the fish's mouth, and he released that small fish back into the water. If you've ever had that experience, even with a little bluegill, you know how your hand smells when you hold a fish, even for a couple seconds. It just smells. So his name was Nick. He meant to start leaning over the side of the boat and just put his right hand back in the water and give it a swish, right? Rinse it off. And as he started to lean over the water and do that, his other friend of the boat yelled, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." And Nick said, "It's all right. What's the big deal? It's just going to be a couple seconds." And no sooner did Nick lean over the side of the boat, put that right hand in, did a shark lunge out, grab hold of his arm, and completely pull him overboard into the waters. "Get him, get him!" His friends began to panic and scream, and Nick was in the water flailing and trying to punch this shark. And thankfully, eventually, the shark did relent and let go, and his friends were able to reach in and grab Nick and pull him back in the boat. And eventually, he was able to be airlifted to a hospital for surgery. But this story illustrates the power of that sinful nature that even as children of Jesus clings to us. And we know, I know you do because I do, we hear every day those little voices, those little impulses in our minds, those little enticements saying, "Why don't you just try or indulge yourself with this, go ahead. You've got this. You're in control. Just stick your hand in the water of that sin for a little bit. It's just one night out. It's just one time with your friends. How can it hurt? But even a couple fingers in the waters of that sin has enough power to grab hold and pull us completely under. As obedient children, do not be conformed to those former lusts. Because we have our minds, we have our eyes of faith fixed somewhere else. And that is our eternal inheritance, our hope in heaven. And when our eyes are fixed there, every day it gives us the power to crucify those desires of our sinful flesh and former ways. And isn't it worth the sacrifice to deny those sinful urges and pleasures now for this much time and to focus on the eternal blessings and rewards that await in eternity? So you can see the positive but negative side of how that hope, that inheritance in Jesus Christ changes us today. Now Peter goes on to share the positive way that hope changes us today. He continues in verse 15, rather, as the Holy One who called you, you also become holy ones in all your conduct. For it is written, this is from Leviticus, you will be holy ones, for I am holy. For you know that you are not redeemed from the futile way of life inherited from your forefathers with gold or silver, but with the precious blood of Christ, that of a lamb without blemish or spot. Do you see your holy calling here? As He who called you is holy, you are also what? Holy. What does it mean when that word holy is used in the Bible? Holy means separate, set apart, different from this world, different from the common, different from the profane, that God has consecrated you, God has put His name on you in baptism, and He has set you apart from the worldly. That was Israel's call in the First Testament. I am in your midst. You will be separate from the Egyptians and the Canaanite pagans around you. Now, with its fullness in Jesus Christ, we are separate. We are holy, called out of the world around us to be the holy sons and daughters of Jesus Christ. What does that mean in our life today? Our lives will look different than those around us. I read the story of a very, very hurried, impatient driver. So much so that this particular driver was closely, dangerously tailgating the car in front of it. And as those two cars approached an intersection, the light turned yellow. And the car in front of it decided to slow down and stop, rather than do one of those run and guns. You can imagine how the driver behind went ballistic and started to pound on the roof of the car and flash the bright lights and honk the horn and give the finger in the windshield and start to yell all sorts of obscenities out the window. And when that light turned green, that car went up a little bit and then noticed red and blue flashing lights in the rearview mirror. The officer came up to the window, asked for license and registration, and then went and sat back in his car for about 10 minutes. When the officer came back to the car, the driver asked for an explanation. And the officer said, "Sure. When I saw your finger motions, when I saw your flashing headlights, when I saw you screaming obscenities, and I saw the fist pounding on the ceiling, and then I noticed that chrome-plated fish and the 'What Would Jesus Do?' and the 97.9 FM sticker and the Choose Life bumper stickers on your trunk, naturally, I assumed that the car had been stolen." As the holy God who has called you, become holy ones in all your conduct. The more that God works in you to transform you to be more like Jesus, we will be different in this world. We will stand out because God has already put His name on us and set us apart from this world. We don't belong to this world anymore. Our hope is fixed on that eternal inheritance to come. And what's the sole source of this new holy calling and state that we have? Look at verse 18 and 19. We are holy because we have been bought back, redeemed. Not with the finest amount of gold and silver this world has to offer, but with something far more precious and valuable than that. We have been bought back to God by the precious blood of Jesus Christ, that perfect, spotless Lamb of God, who has said, "You are mine," meaning you are holy. And as our eyes are on that inheritance when He comes back, we will look, act, believe different than the world around us. Have some questions in upper room time I'm going to ask you to spend some time reflecting on as we take these words with us. What worldly desire has been tempting you? What's been calling you? Come on, go ahead. Dip your hand in the water. It won't hurt. Just a couple seconds. How does God's call to holiness challenge you at home or work or school or commuting? And then when has your life stood out because of your faith? Those will be on the screen in upper room time. And I pray that that will be a blessing and a challenge to you as we take these words with us.